Celebrations, and for many, sighs of relief, as Austria rejects what would have been Europe's first far-right leader since World War II.
Aber ich bin nicht verbittert. Am Ende des Tages hat bei einer Wahl immer der Wähler recht. Und ich bitte einfach die Österreicherinnen und Österreicher zusammenzuhalten, egal wie man gewählt hat. Und ja, wir werden einfach weiterarbeiten in den Kanälen.
Norbert Hofer lost to former head of the Greens and pro-European candidate Alexander Van der Bellen in Sunday's rerun presidential election. Van der Bellen narrowly won in May, but the vote was recalled due to irregularities. His margin then was just 30,000 votes. On Sunday, it increased tenfold.
The world around us has changed. We had the Brexit vote in Great Britain, in the United Kingdom. We had the election of Donald Trump in the United States, and so on. In 6 months, many things happened.
Austria's presidency is largely ceremonial, but this election was hugely symbolic, seen as an indication of how high the far right has risen across Europe.
You can win with a pro-European position. You can actually win. And you shouldn't be afraid of AfD, Madame Le Pen, and all the groups that work for destroying the European Union.
It's an encouraging result for EU leaders, but while it's a victory, it isn't a resounding one. In the wake of this bitter election campaign, it's clear that Austria is a country divided. Most voters rejected Hofer's anti-immigration and Eurosceptic platform. But with only a few percentage points between the candidates, Van der Bellen will have to work to bring unity. And while defeated, Hofer's sights are now set on gaining influence in Austria's parliament.
Oh ja, das haben wir und wir werden noch stärker werden.
Should this result be taken as a sign the far-right's momentum is slowing? Or will this further ignite the movement and the divisions in Austria and across Europe? Yvette McCullough, the Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Vienna is Johannes Hübner. He is an Austrian MP for the Freedom Party of Austria. And also in Vienna is Klaus Werner Lobo, an author and an activist for the Social Democratic Party. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Johannes Hübner, let's start with you. Your party lost. Austrians have said they don't want you and they don't want Norbert Hofer. Has it been a difficult pill to swallow over the past few hours?
Well, it was not the Austrian that said it, but it's part of the Austrian. The majority of the Austrian, about 52%. So 58% said, we like you. So it's a little different difference if a nation rejects you or if 52%.
But I mean, that's how elections work, right? The majority said they don't want you.
That's it. That's it. So we lost. We didn't win the majority, so we are the losers. That's true. But we haven't been rejected by Austria. We didn't get a majority. That's normal in elections. If you fail like Renzi in Italy, 60% reject you. Well, that's for a government.
Yeah, but that would be.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
But that's down to interpretation, right? It's based on numbers. It depends. I mean, technically speaking, 50.1% would give you a majority. That would mean that the majority rejected you. So let me ask you my question again. Has it been a difficult pill to swallow, given that you lost and the majority voted against you?
Always difficult to swallow losing pills. You want a victory. If you campaign for 11 months for your candidate and the candidate campaigns against other contenders and you lose in the end, it's bitter to swallow. Sweeter is victory. That's no question, but that's democracy. One of the two contenders always has to swallow the pill of losing, the pill of defeat. That's normal. But it was not a crushing defeat, so we are not depressed.
Okay.
And you must see, we are not a party that won 40% in the last election.
Right.
We had 20% in the last election, and now we collected over 48% of the votes for our candidate. So it's not a bad result after all.
Yeah,
but
interesting.
It's not the victory. It's
Let me bring
victory.
in Klaus there. Yeah, because you got 47% of the vote. That's a substantial amount. Klaus, you must be relieved, but what do you make of the fact that 47% of the Austrian people still voted for that party, the far right?
Yeah, it's a matter of fact we have to really take care of, because these 47% are not all people who like the Freedom Party, who are not all people who are racist and right-wing extremist and anti-European like the Freedom Party candidate is. They are people who are afraid of the future. There are people who do not see, who want some change. And I think we have to be aware that really the big parties have to recognize this, and there is some change needed. So some people voted for change, and they voted, and the Freedom Party put a lot of fear into people, fear against migrants, fear from Europe, fear of modernity. So people voted out of fear of their futures, and we have to take it really seriously. But it's not the Freedom Party who won 47%. It's the fact that many people do not see a positive future.
Right. Okay, so 47% still voted for the Freedom Party. Let me ask you, Johannes, was it a mistake, as Klaus put it, that maybe the platform you ran on was based on fear? Was running the platform on fear and anti-immigration and so on, looking back on it now, was that a mistake? Was that maybe the reason why you didn't win?
It would have been a mistake to run a platform on fear if we would have done so, but we never did so. What my colleague from the Social Democrat Party told us is the usual avalanche of prejudice and propaganda sentences. This has nothing to do with reality. This was the platform, the pro-Van der Bellen campaign, trying to attach negative words and negative political theories to Norbert Hofer. They said he's pro-death penalty, pro-leaving the European Union, pro-chaos, pro-destroying jobs, and so on and so on. But propaganda you attach to someone has nothing to do with reality.
But Johannes, might it just be an interpretation of the actual words that Mr. Hofer said himself when he said stuff like Islam has no place in Austria? Don't you think it's reasonable for people to think, hey, maybe that's a little bit racist because he's talking about Islam as a whole?
No, but even if he talks about religion, it has nothing to do with race, because religion and race are completely different subjects. If you want to stigmatize someone, if you want to make a mean and very easy propaganda, you mix up the words. And when you speak about religion, you use the term racist. When you speak about migration, you use the word xenophobia. Right. When you speak about keeping some competences in the national states, you speak about isolation, blowing up Europe, and so on.
Okay.
But, you know, this is propaganda words.
Okay, let me ask Klaus. Klaus, this is propaganda. They're criticizing an idea. They're not criticizing a race. They're just talking about immigration. They're not xenophobic.
Yeah,
Klaus?
That's ridiculous. The Freedom Party lives of hatred. It lives of dividing people. And they live of corruption. The only aim of the Freedom Party is to gain money out of the people. They had an anti-establishment campaign, but they are the establishment. They are the people. For example, Freedom Party has the most processed criminals of all parties. The rate of criminals in the Freedom Party is higher than the Austrian population. So Freedom Party represents corruption, criminality, nationalism, hatred, division, and so on. And they were not successful with that. They are losers, and Austrian people showed that we don't want that. We don't want fear, we don't want hate.
Johannes, let me ask you about the zeitgeist. There was a feeling before the election that right-wing populism was spreading across the continent. So people would talk about the Freedom Party. They would also say, you have Marine Le Pen in France, and this is going to be a wave of elections and referenda as we go along where the right-wing populists win. But now we saw that you guys lost, and maybe it's a sign that, hold on, liberalism, pluralism, cosmopolitanism, maybe it's not dead yet. And when Mr. Van der Bellen said in victory, today from Vienna, a red-white signal of hope will be sent to all the European capitals, he's basically saying that this kind of liberalism or openness is not dead and they're going to keep on fighting. How do you feel about that?
Well, after I listened to my colleague from the Social Democrat Party, I got the feeling that liberalism, multi-party systems, freedom of thought and mind are in danger, because I thought I hear someone who has been trained by the Red Khmers, personally by Mr. Pol Pot, because the propaganda is likewise. You use 10, 12 words you hear in the most wild propaganda from dark ages. You use it against the party, and you say the other party is working against pluralism, liberalism, and so on. But I think everyone who listened to my colleague will understand where a real threat for pluralism, democracy, freedom, and European values and tradition is coming from. As you listen to the differences, the way we speak, I speak, and my colleagues speak. So whoever thinks that the loss of Hofer is a victory for pluralism and so on, he should really carefully read the media and carefully listen to what my colleague from the Social Democrat Party said.
Okay, Klaus, you want to respond to that? You're not standing for pluralism. You're basically sounding like Pol Pot to Johannes.
Well, the Freedom Party is a party of the last century. And I think their time is over soon, because people vote for diversity, people vote for the future, people vote for democracy, people vote for Europe. And it's just with fear that they had some victories, but I think their time will be over soon.
Okay, Johannes and Klaus, unfortunately, we are out of time. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you. Thank you very much for joining us.